So this was, God, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I was right out of college, armed with a pretty useless English degree and a mountain of student loan debt. I was applying for everything, and I mean everything. Barista, data entry, dog walker, nothing was sticking. I was living on my friend's couch, and my welcome was just about worn out. That's when I saw the ad. It was on one of those high-end childcare websites. Live-in nanny and educational governess wanted for 8-year-old girl. The pay was, it was astronomical. Like, pay off my loans in a year kind of money. The posting was for a family that had just relocated to an old estate about 2 hours upstate. They were in the middle of a massive restoration and needed someone to be a stable presence for their daughter. I fired off my resume, not expecting anything. I got a call an hour later. It was the mother, Eleanor. She was charming, you know. One of those voices that sounds like old money and honey. She was funny, sharp, and apologized for the mess of the renovation. Her husband, David, was some big-shot investment guy. They'd bought this massive, 150-year-old Victorian mansion and were restoring it to its original glory. They'd moved in 6 months ago, and their daughter, Emily, was having a hard time adjusting. I drove up for the interview 2 days later. The gravel road to their house was at least a mile long, winding through these dense, dark woods. Then you come around a bend, and the house just appears. It was breathtaking. 3 stories, dark slate roof, a huge wraparound porch, and one of those creepy-looking corner turrets. It was beautiful, but also heavy. It felt like it was watching me. Most of the house was covered in scaffolding, and there were stacks of lumber and bags of cement everywhere. Eleanor met me at the door. She was exactly as I pictured. Tall, elegant, probably in her late 30s. She gave me a huge smile and a warm hug, immediately putting me at ease. She introduced me to David, who was just as charismatic. They were the perfect, glossy magazine couple. Then they introduced me to Emily. She was this tiny, pale little thing. She was sitting in the massive, unfurnished living room, just staring at the wall. She had this long, dark hair, and she didn't look up when we came in. Eleanor kind of laughed, a little nervous sounding. "Emily, honey, this is Chloe. She might be coming to stay with us." Emily didn't turn. She just whispered, "She won't like it here." David clapped his hands together, a little too loudly. "That's just Emily. She's got an overactive imagination. This old house, you know. She'll warm up to you." They explained the situation. The renovation was stressful. Emily was acting out. She'd become withdrawn and had an imaginary friend. They said it was normal, a coping mechanism. My job would be simple. Create a routine. Schoolwork, playtime, meals. Be her friend, her teacher. I'd have my own suite of rooms on the 3rd floor, separate from the family. I needed the money, desperately. So when they offered me the job on the spot, I said yes. I should have listened to that little girl. I moved in the following Monday. My rooms were amazing huge, newly renovated with a brand new bathroom. The rest of the house, though, was a war zone. Dust sheets everywhere, the smell of sawdust and paint, and the constant sound of saws and hammers from the workmen during the day. My first few days with Emily were strange. She wasn't mean or a brat. She was just empty. She would do her schoolwork without complaint. She'd eat what I made her. But the whole time, she seemed to be listening to something I couldn't hear. And she was always talking to the girl in the wall. Her nursery was on the 2nd floor. It was this huge room, but all her furniture was clustered in one corner, right next to this specific patch of the wall. The wall was covered in this old, faded floral wallpaper, but this one spot, about 6 feet wide, was different. It was newer wallpaper, a tacky, clashing pattern. It looked like a repair job, and a bad one. I'd be reading a book to her, and she'd suddenly stop me. She's trying to talk. I'd play along. "Oh? What's your friend saying, Emily?" Emily would press her ear to the patched up part of the wall. "She said she's cold. She wants a new blanket." It was creepy, but kids are creepy, right? I'd just say, "Well, you tell her it's nice and warm out here," and try to move on. But it started to escalate. One morning, I came into the nursery, and Emily was sitting in her usual corner, holding a little black button, like an old-fashioned jet-black boot button. "Where'd you get that, Em?" I asked. She pointed to the wall. "A present. From the girl." I got a chill. I checked the wall. It was solid. No holes, no cracks. "Okay, very funny. Did you find it on the floor?" "She gave it to me," Emily insisted, her voice getting that flat, serious tone. "She likes you. She thinks you're pretty." That really got under my skin. I told Eleanor about it. She just sighed, rubbing her temples. "Oh, Chloe," her imagination. "The workmen are probably leaving old junk around. Just throw it away. Please don't encourage her." She seemed more annoyed than concerned. The days went on. The gifts kept appearing. A small yellowed piece of lace. A single tarnished silver earring. Things a little girl from 100 years ago might have owned. And all the while, Emily's conversations got more intense. I started hearing it myself. At first, I thought it was the workmen. But this was at night. I'd be in my room on the 3rd floor, and I'd hear it faint from below. Scratching, not a rat. It was rhythmic. Then, the whispering. I'd be walking past Emily's room after she was asleep, and I'd hear it from inside. A faint, thin whisper. I'd open the door, and Emily would be fast asleep, but the whispering would stop. I was starting to lose it. I was jumpy. I wasn't sleeping. I was convinced the house was haunted. I told David this time, trying to sound casual. "This old house sure makes a lot of noise, huh?" He didn't laugh. His whole face hardened. "It's the house settling, Chloe. Pipes, wind. That's all. You're here to be a stable influence on Emily. You starting to believe in ghosts isn't helping her. Do you understand?" The way he said it, it wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. That night, I decided to do some research. I couldn't sleep anyway. The satellite internet was slow, but I managed to get onto the county's Historical Society website. I typed in the address of the house. The blood drained from my face. It wasn't just the Blackwood House. The locals had a nickname for it. The Orphan's Grave. It had been a workhouse in the 1890s, then a horribly underfunded orphanage. The matron who ran it, a woman named Agnes Blackwood, was a monster. The reports were full of missing children. Dozens of them, over 2 decades. They were problem children, disobedient. They'd be sent to the quiet room for discipline and just never be seen again. The matron was eventually arrested, but they never convicted her of murder. Not enough evidence. But the rumors were that she didn't just kill them. She was saving them. She'd brick them up in the walls. Alive. My heart was hammering. The quiet room. I ran down to the 2nd floor, to the nursery. I looked at that tacky, patched-up section of the wall. That's when I heard it. Not a whisper, a tap. It was a code. SOS. I pressed my ear to the wall, my whole body shaking. "Hello?" I whispered. Is someone in there?" A frantic, terrified scratching erupted from the other side. It sounded like fingernails on plaster. A voice, a real, adult, female voice screamed. It was muffled, but it was clear. "Get me out. Oh God, please get me out." I fell backwards, screaming. The door to the nursery flew open. David and Eleanor were standing there, their faces white with rage. "What are you doing?" Eleanor hissed. "There's someone in the wall." I shrieked, pointing. "A woman. She's alive." The scratching stopped. Dead silence. David walked over to me. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in so hard I cried out. "You're hysterical," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You woke Emily. You're scaring her. Didn't you hear it?" I begged, tears streaming down my face. She was screaming. "We heard you, Chloe," Eleanor said, her eyes like ice. "You're done. Go to your room. Pack your things. We'll pay you for the month, but you're leaving. Now." They weren't even going to check. They didn't care. They were just kicking me out. I stumbled up to my room, sobbing, my mind racing. They were in on it. They had to be. But why? I started throwing my clothes in a bag. I had to get out. I had to call the police. My phone, where was my phone? I'd left it in the kitchen. I crept down the stairs. The house was silent. David and Eleanor were in the living room, whispering angrily. Emily was sitting on the stairs, watching me. Her face was blank. "You're leaving," she stated. "Yes, Emily, I am." "The girl is sad," she whispered, tilting her head. "She liked you." "Emily," I said, my voice shaking. "Who is in the wall? Tell me." Emily just smiled. A slow, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You talk to her. That's against the rules." I grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter and ran for the front door. I didn't even put my shoes on. I sprinted to my car, fumbling with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them. As I bent to pick them up, I looked back at the house. Eleanor, David, and Emily were all standing in the doorway, perfectly still, just watching me. Like a portrait. I got in my car, locked the doors, and tore down that gravel driveway. As soon as I hit the main road and got a single bar of service, I called 911. I told them everything. The history, the scratching, the voice, the parents' reaction. I sounded like a lunatic. I know I did. But they sent a patrol car. They had me wait at a gas station at the end of the road. An hour later, the two officers returned. "Ma'am," the older one said, looking tired. "We did a full walkthrough of the premises. The family was very cooperative. And I demanded, 'The wall, did you check the wall?' 'We did, ma'am. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, well, they're not Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. Their name is Caraway. They showed us the blueprints for the renovation. That entire wall in the nursery was knocked out and reframed 3 months ago. It's brand new. Drywall insulation. There's nothing in it.' 'No,' I whispered. 'That's not possible.' I heard her. Mrs. Caraway also, well, she showed us your employment file, the officer continued, looking uncomfortable. She mentioned you'd been under a lot of financial distress, that you seemed very high dash strong dot single quotes, and that the last nanny, a Miss Sarah Jenkins, was let go for the exact same reason.' 'What?' 'Yes, ma'am. Apparently, she also became obsessed with the house's history, started having delusions, scaring the little girl. They had her involuntarily committed.' I just stared at him. They had an answer for everything. A perfect, neat, tidy answer. The renovation, the tacky wallpaper was just a temporary patch while the new custom paper was on order. The scratching was the new house settling. The voice was me, hysterical, projecting. The last nanny was just crazy. Like me, there was nothing I could do. They told me to go home. I drove back to my friend's place, my entire life in a suitcase in the back. I never got paid. I've spent the last 6 years trying to forget. I have a normal job now, a normal apartment. But I did some digging. I couldn't help it. I looked up Sarah Jenkins, the last nanny. She's not in a mental hospital. She's not anywhere. She's a missing person. Her family filed a report about 5 months before I took the job. And the Carraways, David and Eleanor, they're not new money. They're old money. Their family name wasn't Carraway. It was Blackwood. David was a direct descendant of Agnes Blackwood, the woman from the orphanage. They hadn't just bought the house. They had reclaimed it. I don't know what they're doing there, if it's a cult or a family tradition. But I know what I heard. I heard Sarah Jenkins. And I think Emily wasn't talking to an imaginary friend. She was talking to the last nanny, the one they had trapped in there. A sacrifice, just like her ancestor used to make. The reason they fired me, I realized it later. It wasn't because I'd scared Emily. It was because the renovations were scheduled to demo that nursery wall the very next week. I'd found her just days before she would have been discovered by the work crew. But now, they know I know. And I think they just found a new quiet room to move her to. Last week, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, there was a single old-fashioned jet black boot button. I've been a nanny for almost 12 years. I've seen it all. The helicopter parents, the free-range parents who let their kids eat dirt, the parents who think you're just the help. I've got a pretty thick skin. I thought I'd handled every kind of weird family there was. But the Laramie family, they broke me. I don't nanny anymore. I work in a coffee shop, and I'll probably never be alone in a house with a child again. It started like any other job. I found the listing online. Single father and ER doctor seeks mature, responsible nanny for 6-year-old twin daughters. The pay was excellent, and the hours were stable, which is rare in this gig. The father's name was Dr. Mark Laramie. I went to his house for the interview. It was in one of those brand new, sterile suburban neighborhoods. The house was immaculate. All white walls, minimalist furniture, glass tables. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end dentist's office. There wasn't a single toy or speck of dust in sight. Mark met me at the door. He was handsome, doesn't cover it. He was like something off a TV show. Perfect teeth, great suit, looked exhausted but in a noble, I save lives kind of way. He was instantly sympathetic. He explained that his wife had died in a tragic car accident 2 years ago. He'd been juggling the ER and the girls ever since, and he was at his breaking point. He needed someone, he said, who was all about structure and routine. Then I met the twins, Ella and Anna. They were identical. And I don't just mean they looked alike. They were dressed in matching white pinafore dresses, their blonde hair in matching pigtails. When I said hello, they didn't smile. They just tilted their heads in perfect unison and said, "Good afternoon, Miss Maya." I literally laughed. I thought Mark had trained them to do it as a joke, but he just smiled, sadly. "They're very close," he said. "They've been inseparable since the accident." The whole interview was off. The house was silent. The girls sat on the white sofa, their hands folded in their laps, and just watched me. They never whispered or fidgeted. They just stared. But Mark was so kind, so normal. He was just a grieving father trying to hold it all together. I felt for him. When he offered me the job, I accepted. My main duty was the after-school and evening routine. Pick them up, homework, dinner, bath, and bed. Simple. My first day, he walked me through the routine. Everything was timed to the minute. 5:30, dinner. 6:15, bath. 7 o'clock, story time. 7:45, they had to take their vitamins. 8 o'clock, lights out. And then he got to the last rule, the one that still makes my stomach clench. "This is the most important part, Maya," he said, his face completely serious. "At 8 p.m., after you give them their goodnight kiss, you will step out of the room and you will lock their door from the outside." I just stared at him. Lock their door? Is that legal? What if there's a fire? He nodded, like he'd heard this a million times. There's a smoke detector right above their door, connected to the main system. It unlocks automatically if it senses smoke, but the lock is non-negotiable. It's for their safety. Their safety? From what? He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Since the accident, they've developed a very rare, very severe form of paver nocturnus, night terrors. But it's combined with extreme sleepwalking. They get out. They wander. Anna once got out of the house, and we found her 3 blocks away, standing in the middle of the road. This is the only way I can sleep, knowing they're safe in their room. You cannot open that door, for any reason, until 7 a.m. If they cry, if they scream, you do not go in. It only makes the terror worse. Do you understand? It felt so wrong. But he was a doctor. He was their father. He must know best, right? So that became my life. And let me tell you, the first time I turned that key in the lock, hearing the heavy thunk of the deadbolt, I felt like a monster. The girls, they didn't seem to mind. They just got into their matching beds, pulled the covers up to their chins, and said in unison, "Good night, Miss Maya." It was the creepiest thing I'd ever seen. Mark had a baby monitor in the living room. It had video and audio. He insisted I keep it on, just so you have peace of mind, he said. It did not give me peace of mind. The girls didn't have night terrors. They didn't scream or cry. They just didn't sleep. I'd be sitting on that white couch, trying to read, and I'd look at the monitor. And they'd both be sitting bolt upright in their beds, staring. Sometimes they'd be staring right at the camera lens, motionless, for hours. Then they'd start to whisper. It was too low for the monitor to pick up clearly. Just this sibilant hissing sound. I'd turn the volume all the way up, pressing it to my ear, and I'd catch little snippets the new one is watching. Too curious. "Like Mommy, Daddy said to be good," I told Mark. I said, "Mark, they're not having night terrors. They're just awake, and they're whispering. I think they're scared of the dark." Mark's charming dad face slipped. His eyes went flat. "They're not scared of the dark, Maya. They're fine. You are not a child psychologist. You are their nanny. Your job is to follow the routine. Did you give them their vitamins?" "Yes, of course," I said. "Then it's fine. Just let them be." His reaction scared me more than the twins. Things got weirder. The vitamins, he was so specific about them. They were in a prescription bottle, just labeled the girls' vitamins. It was a liquid. I had to give them 1 teaspoon. Exactly. One night, I was 5 minutes late with the dose because dinner ran long. Mark called me, his voice frantic. "Did you give it to them? Did you give it to them at 7:45? I started to form a horrible theory. He wasn't protecting them. He was drugging them. He was a doctor. He had access. He was locking his own children in, drugging them so they'd be quiet. I became convinced he was some kind of abusive monster. I also started hearing other noises in the house. A faint humming sound coming from the basement. The basement door in the kitchen was locked with a heavy-duty keypad. "What's down there, Mark?" I asked one day. "Oh, just storage. And the main house servers. I'm a bit of a tech head," he'd said with a laugh. "It's just the server fans you hear." But one night, when he was on shift, I was cleaning up after dinner, and I heard it. From the basement door, a thud, like something heavy falling over, followed by a low moan. I froze. I called out, "Hello?" Silence. I told myself it was the house settling, but I couldn't shake it. I decided I had to do something. I was going to get proof. That Friday, Mark told me he was pulling a 24-hour shift. He'd be gone from 7 p.m. Friday to 7 p.m. Saturday. The routine is everything, Maya, especially when I'm not there. Don't forget their vitamins. Don't forget the lock. "I won't," I said. That night, I did the whole routine. Dinner, bath story. At 7:45, I poured the 2 teaspoons of the vitamin, but I didn't give it to them. When they weren't looking, I poured them into a little travel bottle I had in my purse. I'd get it tested. I gave them apple juice instead. They drank it without blinking. "Good night, Miss Maya," they chimed. "Good night, girls." I went out. I turned the key in the lock. Thunk. I went downstairs. I turned on the baby monitor. They sat up just like always. They looked at the camera. And then, for the first time, they smiled. Then they started to whisper. And this time, without the drugs, they were louder. Didn't taste right. She tricked us. Mommy tricked us too. Daddy had to fix her. My blood turned to ice. Daddy had to fix her. I looked at the monitor, and they weren't in their beds. They were gone. I stared. The room was empty. I ran upstairs, my heart exploding. I got to their door. It was still locked, but I could hear them. They were giggling. On the other side of the door, my side, in the hallway, I spun around. They were standing at the end of the hall, by the stairs, in their matching white nightgowns. "You broke the rule, Miss Maya," Ella said. "You didn't stay downstairs," Anna said. "How? How did you get out?" I stammered. They just pointed to a small vent cover near the floor. It was open. They were small. They'd crawled through the vents. "We're going to play a new game," they said. "It's called Mommy's Quiet." Then they ran. Not at me. Downstairs. Towards the kitchen. Towards the basement. I ran after them. "Girls, stop. You'll get hurt." I got to the kitchen and the basement door. It was open. They were standing in the doorway, looking down into the darkness. "Daddy's going to be so mad you found his room," one of them whispered. "You're too curious." Just like Mommy, I walked slowly towards them. I peeked over their shoulders into the basement. It wasn't a server room. It was a bedroom, a hospital room. There was a bed and 4 poles and monitors. And someone was in the bed. A woman. She was emaciated. Her hair was patchy, and she was hooked up to all these tubes. She turned her head. Her eyes were wide with a terror I have no words to describe. It was Mark's dead wife. She saw me. She tried to scream, but only a dry, rattling hiss came out. "Run," she rasped. "Run, He's here." I heard a footstep behind me. I turned. Mark was standing in the kitchen doorway. He wasn't in his scrubs. He was in his suit. He hadn't been at the hospital at all. "Maya," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I told you. The routine is everything." The twins ran to him, giggling, and hugged his legs. "She found Mommy." They yelled. "She's just as bad as Mommy was." I finally understood. The car accident, it was his failed attempt to kill her. When she'd survived, he'd brought her here. A doctor. He knew how to keep her alive. Barely. You're a monster, I whispered. No, he said, taking a step towards me. His eyes were cold. I'm a father. She was going to leave me. She was going to take them. My girls, they couldn't let that happen. Could you, angels? No, Daddy. They squealed. They had done it. The accident. They'd caused it. The wife's terrified eyes weren't just for Mark. They were for them. The lock on their door. The drugs. It wasn't to keep them in. It was to protect me from them. To keep them sedated and contained so they wouldn't fix me too. But tonight, I hadn't given them their medicine. And I'd found the basement. It's okay, Maya, Mark said, walking towards me. He pulled a syringe from his pocket, filled with a clear liquid. You're just very sick. You're going to need a lot of rest. Just like her. Daddy, one of the twins said, tugging on his pants. Can we give her the goodnight kiss? Mark smiled. Of course, Angel. I screamed. I grabbed a kitchen knife off the counter and just ran. I ran for the front door. I didn't look back. I heard him yelling, heard their little feet pounding on the floor behind me. I got the deadbolt undone and fell out onto the front lawn, screaming, "Fire! Fire!" at the top of my lungs. Lights started flicking on in the neighborhood. A neighbor's door opened. That's the only thing that saved me. Mark and the twins just stood in the doorway, watching, before he calmly closed the door. By the time the police got there, I was hysterical. I told them everything. The wife in the basement, the twins, the syringe. They went in. Of course they did. They came out 20 minutes later. Mark was with them, looking concerned and confused. They told me the basement was a wine cellar. There was no woman. There was no hospital bed. The twins were asleep in their room. The officers had to unlock the door to check on them. They were sleeping soundly. Mark told them I'd had a breakdown, that I'd been acting erratically for weeks, that I was obsessed with his late wife. He showed them the empty bottle of vitamins, which, he explained, was just a homeopathic calming tincture. He suggested I'd been stealing it, getting high. I had no proof. The sample I'd taken? It was gone. It must have fallen out of my purse when I ran. I looked like a crazy person. They let him go. They told me to leave and to never contact the Laramie family again. I know what I saw. I know she was down there. He must have had a hidden room, a panic room. Somewhere he moved her when he knew I was onto him. Or maybe he'd fixed her for good while I was calling 911. I live in a different state now, but I know they're still out there. And I know that sooner or later, they're going to need a new nanny. And I know she won't be as lucky as I was. I'm not what you'd call a people person. I've always preferred open spaces, quiet. So, when I lost my job in the city, the idea of getting out seemed like a blessing. I took the first job I could find that was as far away from, well, everything as possible. The ad was in one of those old-school rural newspapers, tacked onto a job board online. Nanny tutor needed for 10-year-old boy. Remote farmhouse. Room and board included. High pay. The high pay part is what got me. I called the number. A woman answered, her voice old and crackly, like dry leaves. This was Mrs. Elroy. She explained the situation. It was just her and her husband, and their 10-year-old grandson, Thomas. Their son and his wife had passed on from a bad fever when Thomas was a baby. The boy was homeschooled. He'd never left the farm, ever. They needed someone to handle his schooling, but also just to be a new face. He's a quiet boy, she'd said. He keeps to himself. He just needs a companion. The farm was. Remote doesn't even begin to cover it. I drove for an hour off the main highway, onto a state road, then onto a dirt road, and then onto a road that was just 2 ruts in the grass. There was no cell service at all. The farmhouse was old, but well kept. White paint, green shutters. But it was surrounded on 3 sides by a massive cornfield. The corn was high, way over my head, and it was late in the season, so it was all brown and dry. It made this constant hissing sound in the wind. Mr. and Mrs. Elroy were exactly what you'd picture. Old, stern, dressed like they were out of an old painting. They were polite, but not warm. They showed me to my room, which was nice, clean, and then they introduced me to Thomas. He was sitting on the back porch, staring out at the cornfield. He was a pale, thin kid with his shaggy, dark hair. He didn't look up when I said hello. "Thomas," Mr. Elroy said, his voice firm. "This is Miss Alex. She's here to be your teacher." Thomas didn't respond. He just pointed one skinny finger out at the field. "He's watching," he whispered. I looked. In the middle of the field, just visible, was a scarecrow. It was unsettling. It wasn't one of those cute, cartoony ones. It was life-sized, dressed in a tattered red flannel shirt and old muddy jeans. Its head was a stained burlap sack with 2 black buttons for eyes. "That's just Mr. Peck, dear," Mrs. Elroy said, patting my arm. "It's Thomas, friend." "Okay," I said, forcing a smile. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Thomas." And Mr. Peck. That night, at dinner, the Elroys gave me the rules. There were only 3. 1. You are never, under any circumstances, to go into the cornfield. "There's old fox traps from my grandfather's day," Mr. Elroy said. "Rusted through. You'll cut yourself open." 2. You are not to touch Mr. Peck. It's Thomas's. He gets very upset if anyone touches it. 3. This was the most important one. All doors, all windows must be locked before sundown. No exceptions. "Coyotes," Mrs. Elroy said, not looking at me. "And other things. The fields aren't safe at night." I figured they were just superstitious farm people. I nodded. Of course. Safety first. My first week was lonely. The Elroys were quiet. The house had satellite internet, but it was so slow it was useless. And Thomas was just weird. He was smart, I'll give him that. He'd do his math problems without a word. But the second I said he was done, he'd be out that back door, sitting on the porch, talking to the scarecrow. Not just to it. It was a full-on conversation. He'd talk, and then he'd listen. He'd nod, his face serious, and then reply. "No, Mr. Peck, she's nice," I heard him say one afternoon. "She doesn't like the city. She's lonely, like us." It made my skin crawl. But the real creep was the scarecrow itself. It moved. I know. I sound crazy. But I'd be washing dishes at the kitchen sink, which looked right out onto the field. I'd see it, way out there, hanging on its post. I'd look down to scrub a plate, look back up, and its head would be tilted, pointed right at the house, right at me. I'd blink, and it would be back to normal. "It's the wind, Alex," I'd tell myself. "It's just the wind on a stick." But it wasn't just the wind. At night, that house was loud. The Elroys said it was settling, but this wasn't settling. This was footsteps, heavy ones, on the wraparound porch. I'd hear them right outside my ground floor window. And a scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged. "It's the coyotes, dear," Mrs. Elroy would say at breakfast, her hands trembling as she poured coffee. "Trying to get at the trash." We didn't have trash on the porch. Then the gifts started. I woke up one morning, and on my windowsill, which I'd left cracked for air, was a dead mouse. Its neck was neatly snapped. I screamed and threw it outside. I asked Thomas, "Did you put that there, Thomas?" It's not funny. Thomas just looked at me with those wide, flat eyes. It wasn't me. It was Mr. Peck. He likes you. He's welcoming you. My blood ran cold. My room was on the second floor. How could he do that, Thomas? He's a scarecrow. Oh, Thomas said, as if it were obvious. Mr. Peck is a very good climber. I started locking my window, even during the day. I had to know what was going on. The internet was useless, but the house was full of old stuff. I went up to the attic, telling the Elroys I was looking for old textbooks. I found the trunk. It was full of old photos. I found one of the Elroys, younger, and a man with them, their son. He was tall, had dark hair like Thomas, and a wide, happy smile. He was wearing a red flannel shirt, the exact same red flannel shirt as the scarecrow. I took the photo downstairs. I was done. I was going to confront them, and then I was going to pack my bag and walk back to the highway if I had to. I found Mrs. Elroy in the kitchen, kneading dough. I put the photo on the table. "Who is this?" She looked at it, and her hands just stopped. She let out a sound, a dry, rattling sob. She crumpled. Mr. Elroy came running in. He saw the photo. He saw his wife. And his face, his stern, hard face, just broke. "Please," he whispered, sitting down. "You have to understand." And he told me. Their son's name was Robert. He and his wife, they didn't die of a fever. Robert, he'd had a sickness of the mind. He'd been normal, and then he wasn't. He became paranoid, possessive. He thought his wife was, I don't know, cheating, or trying to leave. One night, he hurt her. He murdered her, right there in the living room. Thomas was in his crib. The Elroys found them. They called the police. But Robert ran. He ran out the back door and into the cornfield. They searched for weeks. Helicopters, dogs. They never found a body. That was 9 years ago, Mr. Elroy whispered, his eyes on the floor. "So he's dead?" I asked. Mrs. Elroy shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, he's out there. He's been out there this whole time, living in the field. He's not human anymore. He's feral. He watches his son. He protects this farm." My head was spinning. "Mr. Peck, sometimes it's a scarecrow," Mr. Elroy said, his voice trembling. "We put it up to, I don't know, to mark his place. But sometimes he stands there. He swaps places. He watches. He listens. All the rules. They clicked into place. The traps weren't for foxes. They were to keep him in or others out. The locked doors, it wasn't for coyotes. It was for Robert. The footsteps on the porch. The dead mouse on my window. It was him. Robert, he was the good climber. He was assessing me, deciding if I was good enough for his son. "Oh my God," I whispered. "You've been living with this?" "He doesn't hurt us," Mrs. Elroy sobbed. As long as we stay inside. As long as we let him. Watch Thomas." Just then, the wind slammed against the house. The sky, which had been gray all day, opened up. A massive thunderstorm, the kind that just explodes. The power flickered and died. The house went dark. And I realized It was 4:30 p.m., but with the storm, it was already as dark as night. It was sundown. Thomas, we ran to the back porch. He was standing there, his face pressed to the glass of the back door, peering out into the wind and the lashing rain. "Thomas, get away from the door," Mr. Elroy yelled. "Lock it, now." "But he's cold," Thomas whispered, his hand on the deadbolt. "Mr. Peck, Daddy, he wants to come in." "No," Mrs. Elroy screamed. It was too late. Thomas turned the lock. The door flew open with a bang, slamming against the wall. Wind and rain flooded the kitchen. We all stood frozen, staring into the blackness. Nothing, just the sound of the corn, hissing and thrashing. "See?" I said, my voice shaking. It's just a shape, a massive shape, dropped from the roof of the porch. It landed in the doorway, crouching like an animal. It wasn't just a man. It was huge, covered in mud and straw and leaves. He was wearing the tattered red flannel shirt, but it was stretched over this bulk. His hair was matted and long, and he was wearing the burlap sack as a mask. He slowly stood up. He had to duck to get through the doorway. He let out a sound, not a word, a low, wet, chuffing grunt. He looked at the Elroys. He looked at me. His button eyes, they were fixed on me. Then Thomas ran to him. He ran and hugged the thing's muddy, wet leg. "Daddy," Thomas squealed, his voice happy. "You came inside. I told them you were cold." The thing, Robert, Mr. Peck, it reached down a hand caked in dirt, and patted Thomas on the head. Then it looked back at us. "Run," Mr. Elroy whispered. He shoved me. "Take the boy. Get to the pantry. Go." He and Mrs. Elroy, they charged him. They grabbed at him, screaming, trying to, what? Buy me time? "Get out, Alex," Mrs. Elroy shrieked, just as the thing swiped an arm, and I didn't watch. I grabbed Thomas, who was screaming and fighting me now, scratching at my face. "I hate you. You're making him mad. Leave him alone." I dragged him, kicking, into the pantry and slammed the door, fumbling for the lock. The sounds from the kitchen. I will hear them until I die. It wasn't a fight. It was a feast. I sat there in the dark, my back against the door, holding a hysterical, sobbing child for hours. I listened to the sounds, and then finally silence, just the storm. I waited until I saw the first sliver of dawn through the crack in the door. I opened it. The kitchen, I grabbed Thomas. He was limp now, quiet. I grabbed the truck keys from the hook by the ruined back door. I didn't look back. I drove. I drove for 2 hours until I found a state trooper on the side of the road. I told him everything. He believed me, or at least he believed I was terrified. He put Thomas in his car, and they sent a dozen units, a SWAT team, everything, back to that farm. They found exactly what I said they'd find. They found the remains of the Elroys. They found Robert, Mr. Peck. He was in the cornfield. He was just standing there, on his post. He'd put the scarecrow clothes back on. He was just waiting. He didn't fight. They said he was docile. They took him. He's in a state hospital. He'll never, ever get out. They said he's completely nonverbal. He just rocks and twists pieces of straw into little dolls. Thomas is in the state system. I was in protective custody for a while. I had to give testimony. I thought it was over. But then the final police report came out. the psych evaluation for Robert. He was nonverbal, but he did say one thing. When they were processing him, they took the burlap mask off. He looked at the doctor, smiled, and said, his voice rusty from his use, "Did she like my gift?" The first two nannies, they didn't like my gifts. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.